We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And almost didn't have Tom with us this week, but he is here. He's here. I had called up Lee and DJ as potential backups, but we're doing.
And once I heard DJ's name, I was like, I gotta make it.
Speaking of which, I have to text him and say, hey, we're starting, and let him know that he doesn't need to stay up tonight.
Oh, doesn't he always stay up? I figured he's the watch movies guy.
That's
He's gotta
right.
Stay up.
But he won't be expecting a call from me.
He's always expecting a call from you, Rob. He sits by his phone, hoping, praying that one of us will call him and tell him that we love him, I guess. I don't know. This joke's going nowhere.
It is.
All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. What is that noise?
Might be my fan. Is it my fan?
I think it just started raining.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Something's going on. You go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom, which I have been checking like infinitely more lately than I have in years because I don't care about anything else that's going on in the world right now because I got too much stuff going on, so I've just started checking it just to say, and I'm like, yep, still angry.
Yes.
Yeah, so my wife, I think I may have mentioned this last week, but my wife decided that, rather than try to fit kids' doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, all that stuff, all into, throughout the last semester of the school year, she just pushed them all to the summer, and specifically she pushed them all into yesterday and today.
I see.
So we're in between doctor's dentist appointment. I don't know. I had a dentist appointment this morning, and I have something else coming this afternoon. So it says partly sunny, but it is definitely raining. So
speaking of dentists, I'm halfway through my root canal, so it doesn't hurt right now. The bad part got taken care of, so I'm not in any pain. I'm not on any ibuprofen.
So they give you like a fake, like a cap on there, and then they're building you the real one. I always forget about that part. I do. I forget about that part where they drill you out, and then you have to wait for them to create the cap that goes on it. Yeah. So that's good. How was it? It wasn't too bad?
Oh, it's fine. I'm used to all kinds of dentistry, so nothing much can faze me there.
Yeah. All right. I'm kind of in the same boat. After I got braces twice and then got kicked in the face once while having braces, it knocked off like half of my teeth, like the top of half of like a bunch of teeth, and I had to have a bunch of root canals and things put on there. I just, right now they're like, oh, we're going to shoot you with Novocaine. Do you want some laughing gas? I'm like, I don't need it, but I'll take it. Thanks.
Indeed.
It's legal and you're offering, so hit me. Give me a double dose. All right. Let's get some thanks to some listeners of the week here. To become of the week, you have to support this podcast. And so, hey, Mike, what's up?
Camera.
And
hello,
we're back.
YouTube. That's how it goes.
Okay, so what I'm not going to do this week is I'm not going to try to fix the camera.
Okay.
Because last week I fixed the camera a bunch of times, which includes unplugging and plugging it back in, and then it kind of resets itself. I'm not doing that this week because it screwed up our audio, and it took me forever to edit the podcast. So whatever camera we end up on is the one you get. You might get the good one, you might get the bad one. I don't know. A DJ did contact me because he's a know-it-all kind of guy, and he was like, "Oh well, here I've got your fix for you, Tom. It's only going to cost you this much money." I'm like, "You see, you lost me. It cost me that much money." So plus it's a meme at this point, so we're going to stick with it for a little bit longer till it really pisses me off. But come listen to the week to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is basically giving us some money. So if you would like to give us money every month on an ongoing basis, go to patreon.com/avrant podcast, where you can become a contributing, supporting subscribing listener type person. So we have 125 patrons right now, including Niels and Bertrand. So thank you very much to our 125 patrons, including Niels and Bertrand.
Yes, indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 125 patrons over there, Niels and Bertrand. Thank you for being two of them.
Right. Hey, Mike. Let me see here. Did somebody send me photos this week? I kind of felt, was that last week? Was that all last week?
There was some last week. There, not that I recall from the question at AVRant email address. Maybe someone sent something to you directly.
Nobody sent me anything directly.
All right. I might have just overlooked it and forgotten it on the list.
I took care of them this week. So that's what happened. All right, so we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Carl, who really enjoyed Preston's AVRant drinking game and thought of several more commonly used phrases that could be added to the list. Hey, I've got a couple I could add to that list too, but I don't think DJ's liver can handle it.
That's right.
Art, John, who recently found us on YouTube, Niels, who's part of the 2 Hour Plus Club, and let us know that he is by saying the secret word. If you don't know what we're talking about, you're not a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, or at least you haven't been for long enough.
Yeah, that's going back quite a ways for the secret word that was said at the very end of like one episode years ago.
Yep, years ago. Yep.
Code word.
Only for the most hardcore.
That's right.
Albert says our comments about trying to get deeper bass via subwoofer upgrade in this open room were not the answer he wanted, but they were the answer he needed. So, also a Dark Knight fan. Jack with the 4 gigantic 6-way subwoofers. He insists that he is the original Jack, so all other Jacks are imposters. I will let you all fight it out in a cage match. And, of course, Bertrand. So I'll go back and do them all again. Carl, Art, John, Niels, Albert, Jack, and Bertrand all send us notes of gratitude, so thank you very much.
Alrighty, I'll say them once more. Carl, Art, John, Niels, Albert, Jack, and Bertrand. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We do appreciate them. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions, and I'll roll right into what everybody is waiting for who noticed that I made the biggest mistake of mistakes last week because I didn't know at the time of recording, and it was like literally as we were recording that the corrections got put up on Apple's website, their support page, describing how you can get access to lossless music and Dolby Atmos music via the Apple TV 4K specifically. That's where I really screwed up last week. I did try to put a correction in the text in the show notes for the show, but of course not everybody is reading the podcast ahead of time if you're just putting it in a playlist and letting it play. So the major correction is that with an Apple TV 4K, using its HDMI output, you can indeed listen to Dolby Atmos music from Apple Music. I said last week that didn't work. That was the best information I had at the time of recording, and that changed mid-recording, or probably earlier, but I just wasn't checking just prior. So yeah, you absolutely can do it. Now, just to clarify for everybody, if you're using an Apple TV 4K, you do need to activate both lossless and Atmos. It doesn't have them on by default. So you have to go into the settings, go to your apps section of the settings, and the music app. And that's where under audio quality, you can select lossless now. And under Dolby Atmos, you can set it to automatic or off. So, of course, automatic if you want to actually hear Dolby Atmos music soundtracks in Dolby Atmos. Lossless is limited to 48 kilobits or 48 kilohertz. It won't go up to 24,192. It'll be capped at 48. So for the folks who are asking how to get every last bit of information from Apple Lossless, you cannot do that with an Apple TV 4K. I had that part right. But Atmos works. So there we go. Hooray. And I'm happy that it works. People have been enjoying it. It got quite a few mentions on Twitter, rather. People saying that they were really quite enjoying the Atmos music.
Right. And now they have that spatial sound, too, which I guess works. I guess it's part of the same deal.
There's like three things going on because, okay, spatial audio is basically just head-related transfer function. So spatial audio is Apple's head-related transfer function that can get applied to any pair of headphones, or it can get applied to, like, their HomePod speakers, a pair of speakers. You can apply spatial audio, and that's their head-related transfer function, to try and make it sound like the sounds aren't coming from, like, within your skull, and instead that the sounds are coming from out around you by applying that equalization to it. Then there's spatial audio with dynamic head tracking, and that only works with their AirPod earphones and headphones, so that it sounds as though your virtual speakers are staying put while you move your head. So that only works with that. And then Dolby Atmos is like the soundtracks are actually encoded in Dolby Atmos, and then if you're listening to it in stereo from headphones or speakers, they apply spatial audio, their head-related transfer function to it. It will also work with the dynamic head tracking if that works, but if you don't have those things, if you actually have a full speaker system, 9 or 11 speakers, or I guess 7 if it's 5.1.2, then it's just Dolby Atmos. Goes to your AV receiver, it's Dolby Atmos, is Dolby Atmos, is Dolby Atmos, and there's not actually spatial audio applied to that because it's not stereo anymore. So very confusing, but yeah, bottom line, you can listen to both lossless and Atmos from an Apple TV 4K, but lossless won't go all the way up to 192. It's capped at 48 kilohertz. The end.
All right, and on top of all of that, Rob did receive his SPK 618 from Denon, which is for those of you that don't remember, that's the solution for the HDMI 2.1 debacle that's been going on between Yamaha and Onkyo and not Onkyo. I don't know, maybe Onkyo. I don't know what they're doing over there.
Denon and Marantz
and Yamaha have all had this HDMI 2.1 problem.
But this is only a fix for Denon and Marantz. That's the only ones. You do have to register on their website with a serial number and the place and date that you made the purchase. So they are checking that you got it from an authorized seller and that you have the serial number. You can't just buy it in a store or buy it off a website. So yeah, it arrived. Apparently it's manufactured in Vietnam. That's what it said on the front of the package there. And then I just had a couple humorous things. So on the plus side, it functions. Plug in my Xbox Series X to this, plug this SPK618 into my Denon X6700H, and now 4K 120 and variable refresh rate from my Xbox Series X works instead of being a black screen. So it does what it says on the tin. You can see a lovely spot on the back of this box where a second HDMI input could have gone very nicely physically, but it isn't there. There's only one input and one output. Now, the cons are you have to plug in another device because this has its own power plug, and it's micro USB because, you know, we're right up to date with our USB standards, but whatever. They include the plug. It's not terribly long either, the power cord. So, but any micro USB cord will do. It's only the low
So you got to
power.
use that little wall wart thing that they, for power.
And it comes with like every type of plug. So they're clearly sending out this same thing to everyone in the world because it's interchangeable plugs. And then rather humorously, it comes with a 4-foot long HDMI cable that is clearly labeled on its jacket premium high speed, not ultra high speed. But since it's only 4 feet long, it seems to work absolutely fine for 40 gigabits per second. But yeah, I just found that a little humorous that it clearly is labeled premium high speed, not ultra high speed.
Well,
whatever.
Test your cables, people.
It's the same it's the same for the PlayStation 5. The cable that comes with the PlayStation 5 labeled premium high speed, not ultra high speed, but it still works. So there you go.
All right, in the news, IKEA and Sonos have a new speaker that's part of their Symfonisk.
There was a video. They said it. It's Symfonisk.
I don't care. In this line also is a lamp, which is a speaker, and a bookshelf, which is also a speaker, okay? So it's important to understand that the speaker is both a book and a shelf. So you can put it on a bookshelf like a book, or you could put it to the side.
Mount it on the wall.
Mount it on the wall horizontally, and then put books on top of it. So there's both a book and a shelf.
Yes.
So, and if you thought to yourself, that's what I needed in my life, you are one of the very, very few who thought that. But anyways, they have a new one.
A new thing as part of the Symfonisk series, yes.
Yeah, so I guess the bookshelf, which is both a book and a shelf, was $99. The lamp was $180. So they've introduced the picture frame, which is not a picture frame.
Yes.
Oddly. Like the other one's a lamp, and the one before that was a book and a shelf. Mm-hmm. This one is a picture frame that is not a picture frame, and it's $199 or whatever, $200.
That's right.
Okay, so what it is a frame that there is grills that you can put in there, basically. I think they're fabric. It's very hard to tell from the pictures. They look fabric.
It's acoustically transparent, whatever's going on
whatever
there.
it is. It may be a metal mesh that's painted, but it's acoustically transparent. But it kind of it like clicks into, and it looks like it might be magnetically held into place.
Yeah.
It clicks into this frame, right? It is a picture frame, but then you can't just put whatever picture you want on it. So you put it up there. It's got it can be, again, horizontal or vertically hung there. And if you're using the Sonos app, you can wirelessly send music to it via AirPlay 2 or Wi-Fi. 2 picture frames can be daisy chained together because it needs power still. So you got to plug one into the other one and the other one into the wall.
That's right.
Somehow. But there's always power cords going everywhere. A while ago, they leaked. There was a leaked manual, and it says you can use them as wireless surrounds when partnered with a Sonos soundbar. It measures 22 inches by 16 inches by 2 inches deep. Controls are hidden in the back, depending on how you orient it.
If you orient it vertically, it's on the left side.
Or horizontally, it's probably the top? Or
the top.
No,
yeah.
I think it's the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it doesn't really matter. And so the question you have to ask yourself, they're gonna first of all, it's gonna come in a white or in a black, which is kind of like almost like a Starfield. It's kind of what it looks like.
Almost like a snowflake, maybe, kind of.
Yeah, so the white one kind of looks snowy, and the black one kind of looks like a Starfield. So there's a couple more that are going to be come out from some artists I've never heard of in August, which are going to be $20 a pop. The question you have to ask yourself is, can I just buy this thing and then put whatever I want on it? And the answer is, I'm pretty sure. Like, if you went to SoundCloud or whatever, not SoundCloud, what's it called? Spoonflower? What's the name of it? That's it, Spoonflower. And printed your own acoustically transparent image, and that was around the same size.
Right.
Could you wrap this thing? And the answer is, in my mind, is you just,
sure.
You could
it's
do
a little
it.
DIY,
Now,
but I don't see why not.
I bet you look at Instructables, if that's still a website that does anything, like 2 days after this thing is actually released, which is on June 15th, I believe.
Yeah.
They'll have some sort of hack for that. So I have a hard enough time getting people to hang room treatments that have images on them on the wall. I mean, this is just another thing that we'll try to get, but I wish it was a little bit more compatible with everything other than just Sonos. I mean, there's no Bluetooth compatibility that anybody can ascertain.
No.
It seems like that's not going to be the case. So, you can use them as a stereo pair, but even though it's all part of that same Symfonisk line, you can't pair a lamp with a picture or a picture with a bookshelf.
Yeah, that was a weird little thing. Yeah.
It's just the two pictures together to make stereo. So it could be stereo fronts if you're using your Apple AirPlay 2, but if you're going to be Sonos, you pair it with a soundbar, you can use them as surrounds. Reportedly.
Yeah.
Until I actually see that.
Right.
We don't know. All right, so when Apple TV Plus launched, you could get it for free for 1 year if you bought an Apple device, but starting June 1st.
July 1st,
sorry. You'll only get 3 months of Apple TV Plus with the purchase of an Apple device, so make that purchase soon if you were going to buy some hardware from Apple anyway. So get on it.
Indeed.
I can't. My dishwasher broke, and I can't get a dishwasher because they don't exist anymore. Apparently,
like
nobody's selling them. Not the ones I want.
I wouldn't expect that. Weird. I was kind of thinking of maybe getting a new Apple TV 4K, the brand new one, the second generation one. So I don't know. I guess I can stack another year on top of my current year that runs until November when I bought my iPhone. So
will it work like that? Will they just tack another year onto it?
I think so. I'm pretty sure it stacks. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But if I wait, I'll only get 3 months.
Yeah. Xbox officially stated that they will be bringing Xbox Cloud Gaming, formerly called xCloud, directly to smart TVs via an app. They also intend to sell their own streaming stick that will support Xbox Cloud Gaming. No firm launch date. PCs will also get an Xbox Cloud Gaming app later this year. And everybody over at what's it called? Stadia was like, that's what we were doing. We were doing that.
And Amazon's got Luna launching later this month in June. Luna is supposed to be coming online. So everybody's got these streaming gaming things.
I thought Netflix was also working on something too.
Oh yeah, I think so.
I read that. I read a headline that said that, and I thought, I don't care.
So Xbox is like, well, nobody can buy one of our new consoles, so might as well just let everyone play without a console. That's the solution.
I don't know. I think one of them just released a remake, or maybe both of them, the remake of like one of the Final Fantasies, was it 7 or whatever the one that is with Cloud or whatever.
Yeah, there was Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 1 of an infinite number, possibly, because they only did like the first 2 stages in that remake. That was PlayStation, though. That wasn't Xbox. Xbox announced a whole bunch of exclusive titles that'll be coming throughout the year and into 2022 at E3. But E3 wasn't like super bombshell year. There wasn't anything super surprising announced at E3 this year, so not much to cover there.
2022 is going to be bonkers.
Right.
2022 is going to be the year. We'll finally get chips back online where we can get like things shipping and stuff like that.
Well, you can get an Xbox Series S. Those things nobody wants. So there's piles of those available, but the Xbox Series X is sold out.
I just want something that doesn't always say Dolby Atmos, because my Xbox One always says Dolby Atmos.
That's supposed to be coming, Tom. It's in the Alpha Ring. Supposed to be coming.
Yeah. This Alpha Ring is some level of hell I'm not a privy to.
Right.
All right? It's also in the good place, in case you're wondering. Comments. Infinite Gary let us know that the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater is now named TCL Chinese Theater. Of course it is.
That's what it is.
It was Grauman's Chinese from 27 to 73, Mann's Chinese from 73 to 01. Went back to Grauman's, which is when I lived there, Chinese Theater from 2001 to 2013, and then TCL bought the naming rights. That agreement is in place until 2023. So I did not know that. So thank you. When I was there, when I was growing up, because I was born in 71. When I was growing up, we all called it Mann's Chinese, and then when I moved to Los Angeles, it was called Grauman's, and that threw me off for a while, and then I didn't know what happened. So,
thank you, Gary. That clears that up.
Yes. Now I can live my whole life not completely forgetting that fact exists. Andrew, last week, Andrew mentioned that his wife listens in while he's watching us on YouTube, but we didn't know her name. She heard that and said, so I'm either Andrew's wife or Taurus's mom. So her name is Brenda. Taurus's. That's a nice name. Taurus.
Strong I'm assuming is their child.
Could be a cat, dude. Do not make the assumption.
Right? Yeah, you're true. That's right. All sorts of assumptions being made.
They call them fur babies these days. Everybody gets mad if you call your kids skin babies, but whatever.
Well, now when your camera cuts out, you can say hi, Brenda.
Hey, Brenda.
Mike's time has passed.
Sorry, Mike. You were dead to me.
Oh, dear.
All right, Andrew here heard us pondering about how he
This
built
is a different Andrew, by the way.
It's a different Andrew.
There was Andrew P first, and now we're on to Andrew B.
Yeah, there's Andrew Brent. There's Brenda's husband, and then there's Andrew. Okay,
that's right.
So Andrew, I'm sorry, you're no longer Andrew. You're Brenda's
husband. That's right. Sorry. That's how that goes.
That's right. That's how that goes. So, because clearly, the line of power, the lineage of power in your family, the pinnacle up there is Brenda, and then everybody relates to her.
There you go. But now we're on to the Andrew who gets to keep continuing being called Andrew because hasn't told us a spouse's name.
God, you might not wanna either. So this Andrew, the actual Andrew, last week we mentioned that his wife, I'm sorry, I just scrolled in, heard us pondering about how he built one of his subwoofers into a seat riser in his synthesis on the cheap theater. Now, I did wonder about that, and then I went to your whatever thread over at whatever AVS and I scrolled through and I found some pictures of it, and I could see what you did. The grate has me completely freaked out, though. I'm gonna be honest with you, and I haven't scrolled down, but the grate that's in the back there just screams.
That'll be coming up.
There's going to be
first
things
showing the images we saw last week of his gorgeous theater, and now we'll get into that seating riser and the subwoofer contained within.
Yeah, those speakers are just so ridiculous, though. Up front, it's just so ridiculous. I just feel like. I'm glad they're behind a screen, because if not, I would feel like they would say exterminate. So we had a local car audio company fabricate a custom enclosure that exactly matches the internal volume and port tuning of the two subwoofers that are behind the screen at the front of the room. That custom enclosure was placed inside the seating riser with a 1-inch air gap on all sides and green glue joist tape used as damping material around. The seating riser itself is not physically connected to any of the walls. It is heavily braced, filled with insulation, has a double deck of OSB and lots of screws to prevent any squeaks. So the riser is very inert, and it's decoupled from the walls and it's decoupled from the sub. So that's good.
Yes.
The driver and port fire upwards through custom steel grates that were fabricated by a local metal shop and engineered by Andrew's brother to withstand 750 pounds on top of them. So, like one good-sized American.
On top of a couch, could be.
So these grates, if you guys are looking at them on or whatever, I was like, because I feel like there needs to be.
Well, he did cover them with cloth. I don't have the image of it. He didn't send that to me, but he did cover them with speaker grill cloth so that there aren't actual holes for, I don't know, Lego to fall through.
Anything, popcorn.
Yeah.
I mean, dust. Whatever.
So there is a filter in the form of speaker grill cloth on top of these grates, but this is letting us see what the grates actually are. And
then they look. I mean, this is he's just a phenomenal job with this theater. It's just nuts.
Really cool.
This is what I wish I could do in my home theater, and I'm sitting here, and I don't want to paint the walls because I'll have to move furniture, and I don't want to have to do it. That's how lazy I am when it comes to this. Well, I've also got 3 kids who are running me ragged. So what are you gonna do? All right, let's get some questions in here, Mike. Mike recently remodeled his basement, and that includes a new dedicated home theater room. It's 14.5 by 17.5. He had to use a sliding barn door to close off the back. Nothing else would fit. He still needs to complete the LED lighting and then get the room acoustically treated and all the gear set up, but he's excited. The walls have all been insulated, and the drop tile ceiling is 1-inch thick acoustic tiles with insulation above them as well. He's got a hidden door to the right of his projection screen that hides a 3-foot deep space behind his theater's front wall. He's got a sump pump back there. Back there. That's a lot of plosives in one sentence. So he needed to maintain access. He's gone with LG's HU85 ultra short throw projector and 100-inch Elite Screens Aeon CLR screen. The projector sits on a Salamander AV cabinet that also houses all of his electronics. And not to worry, he has a CyberPower sine wave UPS battery backup to protect the projector. So this is a light gray room. I kind of like that front wall is very interesting.
Yeah, it is cool. It's it almost looks like siding a little bit.
That's exactly. And I had siding in my living room in a house in Jacksonville, and we painted it, and I just loved it.
And then because it's textured, he's actually got a door in the front right corner, but you really don't see it when it's closed.
Really can't
it blends
see it.
right in.
Yeah, it's really quite nice.
Yeah.
So like a tweed, it looks like almost maybe tweed / brick layout sort of carpet there, and some nice. Yeah, he needs to put some acoustic material up in here, but other than that, it's looking pretty nice.
He does have an acoustic tile ceiling though, so that helps. That
really does. Yeah. So he's got he's already got a third. I mean, not the carpet. If you count the carpet in the pad underneath as part of the acoustic, absorption of the room, he's got a third of it finished already because he's got the ceiling and the floor. But the floor doesn't look like it's going to be that absorptive. So
no, it doesn't look like a particularly plush carpet.
Yeah, it's gonna be really nice in here. It's got 2 rows of 3 seats each, and they're all theater seating. So he already owns 7 Polk LSi series speakers from 2004, plus 2 Polk PSW 1000 subwoofers, which are dual 10-inch drivers in each sub, and then they're ported. It's a ported sub. They've all been boxed up for the past 8 years, though. He owns a 200-watt per channel, 7-channel B&K amplifier. He hasn't used that in a long time either, so he won't know for sure that it still works until he hooks it up and gives it a try. He's definitely getting a new receiver or pre-pro so that he has all the modern HDMI features, but he isn't sure what would be the best in terms of amplification. All of the Polk LSi speakers, 2 of the larger bookshelf models, 4 of the smaller bookshelf model in the center, are spec'd at 4 ohms. For convenience sake, he preferred just to have an AV receiver, but he's a little hesitant. To try powering 7 4-ohm speakers with just a receiver. Should he get a dedicated pre-pro and hope his B&K amplifier is still working? Should he get an AV receiver? And if so, does he need to look for something like an Anthem model that specifically mentions supporting 4-ohm speakers? This is not a humongously large theater. Okay, let's just start with that.
He is not sitting super far away from any speakers.
That's and to me, so this is what I would do. I would buy an AV receiver with pre-outs, which in your system, you're already going to get that whether you like it or not. Like if you get the stuff that
there are 7-channel models because he's only got 7 speakers, and if he isn't planning to expand to 4 speaker Atmos, then It's
If
possible he stops at 7.
dedicated home theater and you're not going to get the best Odyssey or YPOW, I mean,
I don't.
come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Chances
now.
are.
Come on.
Chances are. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
could
going to end up
definitely
with it anyways.
look at something like a Denon X3700H or whatever its replacement ends up being. I'm assuming X3800H, but that hasn't been announced yet. But you could certainly look at something like that, which has a full set of pre-outs. And then you've got the best of both worlds. But what we were getting at with saying that you really don't have a gigantic room and you're not sitting far away from any of your speakers is that chances are you don't need an external amp of any kind in here. Chances are you can power this off of. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go with the cheapest, most entry-level AV receiver with a bunch of Polk LSi 4-ohm speakers, but a model like the X3700H or higher, I really don't anticipate having any problem at all powering your speakers in this room. If you were much farther away, I'd question it. But
What I was going for was, you're gonna, if you end up, which I think you should, because you're going through all the trouble of having a theater that looks this nice, this well laid out, everything is it's dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do all that and then you're going to get acoustic treatment separate? Why would you not get the better room treatment? You're going to end up with pre-outs anyway. So if your B&K amp still works, Bob's your uncle. Take a shot, DJ. Bob's your uncle. Take another shot, DJ. You've got an amp that you can use. If it doesn't work, chances are you probably didn't really need it anyways. So you are literally getting the best of both worlds.
Right.
I would never, unless you were going to go up to like the Marantz or whatever, the Denon Pre-Pro that is out there. I would not get the Pre-Pro from. Anthem would be fine. It's expensive though. You could get a lot more for your money, and then if your amp doesn't work, you're not stuck thinking to yourself, now I got to buy an amp too. This way, even if let's say worst case scenario, even if your front 3 speakers are like struggling with your receiver, or you're starting to hear a noise floor,
it to be the case.
Wouldn't expect it. But even if you could get away with buying a 3-channel amp, I guarantee you all the rest of the speakers, even if you added 4 overheads, would be just fine with your AV receiver. So
yeah, for the cost that would be associated, I mean, I see no reason to go dedicated pre-pro here. Absolutely not. But I certainly can make the case for when you choose an AV receiver model, go for one that has pre-outs, and therefore you can go ahead, connect it to your B&K. If it's working, great. I mean, I'm sure you'll want to use it anyway. There's no harm in using it. But if your B&K for some reason doesn't work, I don't think you'll have a problem. We should cut off at the pass, though. He was worrying about an AV receiver that specifically says being able to power 4-ohm speakers.
Right.
If you read, say, the X3700H's manual, it does have a mention in there of if you're connecting your speakers and their speakers are 4-ohm, there is a setting. You can set it, the impedance of the speakers, you can set it down to 4 ohms, but don't do it. All it is a current choke. All it is a thing that limits how much current will go through the AV receiver. And like Audioholics has posted multiple articles about this over the years, where they're like, if you want the most power to get to your speakers, just leave it at the 8-ohm setting. There's really no reason to do anything else. So, I mean, that is confusion that I would expect if you're reading the manual, of course you're going to, that's what it says to do. I wouldn't blame anybody for that, especially if you're specifically looking for it, which you might be, because this is on your mind, but just leave it at the 8-ohm setting. That's where it should be. That'll get the most power to your speakers, and you should be fine.
I agree. Scott is setting up a new home theater in a room that is roughly 18 by 16. Since the room is under construction, he has the option to either go with a flat ceiling, approximately 9 feet high, or a pitch ceiling running front to back. I don't know which direction the pitch
would be. So like it's angled on the left and right sides, and then there's a...
Okay, whatever. It would not be a particularly steep pitch, just like 2 feet higher at the peak. Oh, so you mean coming into a peak above his head in the middle? Okay, okay. Right. From the aesthetic standpoint, the pitch ceiling would be preferred, but audio performance takes precedence over aesthetics in this room. So which is better, flat ceiling or pitch ceiling, or does it not really matter? if you don't want to mess around with your subs too much and you just want to put them in the corner and call it a day, the flat ceiling is technically better. That being said,
well, the flat ceiling is more predictable.
Right.
That's the way to put it, because I mean, acoustically speaking, is it the ideal shape to have a flat ceiling? Well, not necessarily, but it is a predictable shape, and that helps. So if we're talking about acoustics and adjusting dual or 3 or quad subs, having the flat ceiling will give you the most predictable results.
That being said, though, I think in a room like this, if you really wanted to have a pitched ceiling, like for resale value, not for living in necessarily, but for resale value, I would say go ahead and get the pitch ceiling. I don't think I have a problem with that. Now, then I would say take that pitch at the very top and fill it with insulation and make the entire ceiling look. I mean, you could entire ceiling look flat again. But when you take it all down, you could it'll look nice again. You know, I that's what I would do. I mean, you're talking about just like a 2-foot pitch. I'm like, okay, you now have a drop ceiling.
Yeah.
You know, across your entire, so that it's a flat room with, and above that you have access to your lights, you have access to your speakers, you have it filled with insulation, you have a massive bass trap over your head. I mean, if it were me, and then you could sell that up to the Brendas of the world, then you know.
And being a drop tile ceiling in construction above that, you know, it could be removed. You could remove that stuff and reveal a pitched ceiling that is behind all of that. So I'm actually kind of in favor of that. Like, the construction of this room has the pitch ceiling that you want, but then acoustically speaking, you install a drop ceiling that makes it look flat. And just like Tom said, above that, now you have access and you can fill it with insulation and have yourself a wonderful, huge bass trap up there.
I'm telling you, man, if I had my druthers, as Rob likes to say, I said it to my wife the other day and she looked at me like I lost my mind.
I mean, Dina is where I heard that first and I liked it, so I kept it.
Yeah. If I had my druthers, I would have a taller ceiling and I would put a drop tile ceiling in it just so I could have access to everything. I mean, the ability to run an HDMI cable anywhere I want in my home theater is an unimaginable value, because HDMI literally sits around with going whoa, trying to figure out ways to screw you out of more money. So I desperately want to have, you know, a 4K projector in HDR, or maybe a 4K display in HDR and everything else. And I'm like, I can't have a projector because there's no way my cable is going to support it. It's just not possible. So I guess
the super short answer is both. Build the pitched roof and then make it flat.
I think that's, to me, if I could get away with that, that's what I would do. Raf found a 2019 Sony A9G 77-inch OLED on clearance, so he bought it. He'll be using it for movies, not games. To get started, he chose the custom picture mode for SDR, which automatically becomes the HDR custom mode for HDR10, and the Dolby Vision Bright picture mode for Dolby Vision signals. Those selections were based on advice directly from Sony, saying that these are the most accurate picture modes out of the box. Raf is considered paying for a professional calibration, but should he? Will it be worth it? There's some part of me that believes that Dolby Vision Bright is not right. It just screams that it's not right.
It's a little bit interesting, because if your room is nigh on pitch black, then technically the most accurate Dolby Vision picture mode is Dolby Vision Dark or Dolby Vision Cinema. I forget how it's labeled in Sony, but it's the other one, not Dolby Vision Bright. However, if you have a fair amount of ambient light in the room, then virtually everyone agrees, even professional calibrators, that yes, the Dolby Vision Bright picture mode will look better, because otherwise you will lose detail in the shadows. There's just no way around it. It's really meant, the Dolby Vision Dark mode is meant for a basically pitch black room. So if Raf has a room that isn't pitch black, then going with Dolby Vision Bright is certainly not the worst thing. It makes perfect sense. So just keep that in mind as far as accuracy. The other picture settings, you definitely want to use the custom mode. That is by far the most accurate out of the box. Okay, so will it be worth it to get a professional calibration? I'm really tempted to say no, because the Sony OLEDs
it's so hard these days with these higher end TVs.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be the case, man. I'm telling you, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it didn't matter how much you spent on it. The professional calibration was almost a guarantee. But these days, they're just so much more consistent than they used to be.
They're
so much more consistent.
It's real close out of the box. Now, you look at the ratings, settings, you look at, I think Sound and Vision posted their settings, anywhere else. It's like almost all of them knocked down red at the top, the red gain. They knocked that down maybe 1 or 2 clicks. It was a little bit too red. So if you were to go into that very simple setting and knock the red gain down 1 or 2, if you're like, everybody looks just a little bit ruddy or sunsets look a little too red or something like that, that you're probably not off base there, but like that's about it. Again, technically, can it be brought closer to perfect accuracy by a professional calibrator? Yes, absolutely yes. I'm not going to say otherwise, but...
So this is a case where somebody probably saved a lot of money on a display.
Sure.
And they're thinking to themselves, hey, I saved, let's say, $500-$600 on a display. It's going to cost me $200-$300 on the calibration. You know, I'm still coming out ahead of the game.
Right.
Should I do it? I can hear my phone ringing in the other room. I mean, if you really want to, I see there's benefit there. There's benefit in the experience, like Rob keeps talking about, you know, but sit there with the calibrator might be the type, and rightfully so on their side. You know, they might not want you in the room because people...
Well, I would talk to them ahead of time and make sure it's somebody who will educate you, who will talk to you as well, and that might cost $400 or $500. It might cost more to for someone who's going to talk you through it. It's
like a mechanic who says, "I will fix your car for $200. I will fix the car that you tried to fix for $400."
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
So I mean, if that's what you want is the experience and the education, then that's okay. But if you're asking, like, am I going to come back after the professional calibration and go, "Oh, this is a completely different looking TV"? No, it's not going to be that type of difference because the Sony is already pretty darn close out of the box.
You know, if it were me and if I was wanting this experience like you're talking about, Rob, I would set the TV up as accurately as I could before they got there.
Yeah.
As accurately as I could. I would have them come in and you know, beforehand say, hey, I don't expect you to make a huge difference here. That's not what this is about. I want you to take me through the calibration process so I can understand what you do. Yeah. So I would have them first... You know, have them come in and measure your TV the way it looks, just how you set it, and then you go, okay, well, now that we've done that, can we just set it back to? Can we just factory reset it, set it back to defaults, and then
see what it was truly out of the box with no adjustment whatsoever, and then the professional cal,
and then have them take you through the steps that they go through, and like I said, like Rob said, it might be double to go through that, but you know, they might just be like, I'm just so happy not to be stuck in a room by myself. This is actually kind of fun. I get to talk about this stuff with people who enjoy it, who are interested to learn. So you never know who you might run into. So, you know, let us know what you do, Raf. It'd be interesting. And I'm having a very hard time with your name because of the leak. So I'm sorry about that. Infinite Gary, DJ, get your glass ready. Okay, so there's not just one question, so you know what that means. Pour yourself a double, maybe a triple. Infinite Gary, can different brands of receivers, or even just different models for that matter, implement the Dolby Surround Upmixer or DTS Neural X Upmixers differently? This is the general question. When he was using his Marantz, he settled on sticking with the stereo listening mode for 2-channel content, but now that he has switched to his Lexicon and that setup, he's liking the Dolby Surround Upmixer compared to how Dolby Surround Upmixer sounded via the Marantz. Placement of surround seemed more distinct with better resolution and better sense of immersion as a result. So is that because Lexicon implemented the Dolby Surround Upmixer a bit differently somehow? It shouldn't be the case. I can't imagine that they have individual control over that because of how Dolby licensing works. How licensing in general works.
Yeah, it's Dolby's algorithms as to how the upmixing is being applied.
It's like this. You know, you go to, it's like you can't go to a burger, like a franchised Burger King or McDonald's, and go in there and get a steak. Why? Because they're a franchise and everything has to. If you go to one here and you go to one in Dubai, they gotta taste the same, or at least similar. You know, they should be more the same than different. And this is the case here. They don't want you to get a different Dolby Surround Upmixer experience from receiver to receiver to receiver, because then they've lost their sound or their gravitas, if you will. So, yeah, I would expect that this is more psychological than it is anything else.
Well, there's one other possibility, though, which is that, as we talked about last week, and I think gets mentioned again, and if we get to that question this week, there are different versions. There's the movie, music, and game versions of both Upmixers. So Dolby Surround Upmixer and DTS Neural X both have movie, music, and game versions of themselves. So I'm wondering, because it's entirely possible, like let's say with his Marantz, he just had it set to auto. So that would have been applying the movie version. If you're in auto, it's going to apply the movie version of it. That's the version of the Upmixer it applies. And then maybe with the Lexicon, he pressed the music button to get the music version because he was listening to 2-channel music. Now,
or game.
there,
yeah.
On the front panel, they're both going to say Dolby Surround. That's not going to change. It doesn't indicate on the front panel whether you're using the music or the movie or the game version of it. So it's entirely possible that he was just listening to a different version of it and didn't get around to listening to the same version like for like because he swapped one out for the other. So it's not
volume
impossible.
Differences and stuff like that.
There's that too, sure.
And
we know Gary moves stuff around in his system, so there might have been a speaker or subwoofer change that happened in the meantime. There's
the content
multiple
too.
variables.
The content can make a massive difference, between one and the other.
But if all else was equal, the Upmixers themselves can sound different depending on which of the 3 versions of the Upmixer you're using, and especially if you were just relying on auto in the past or relying on auto now and had manually chosen one of the other ones before. That could make a genuine audible difference. But in terms of if you used the music mode on the Marantz and the music mode on the Lexicon, and all else was equal, volume and speaker and everything was equal, they should sound the same. There shouldn't be a difference in that sense. Yeah.
So question 2, DJ. Well, he wanted to do a head-to-head between his Marantz and his Lexicon, so he had them both in the room at the same time. He discovered that pressing power on either remote would make both the Marantz and Lexicon power on or off, and the volume buttons of either remote would control both at the same time, too. That made it very difficult since he wanted to control them independently. Any way he could do that.
Weird that they're using the same remote codes, but that certainly seems to be the case.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, isn't Lexicon the one that took an Oppo and dropped it in their own box? Was that not Lexicon or was that somebody else?
I'm pretty sure that was... Well, let's see. Theta was the Panasonic.
No, it wasn't Theta. I think it was a... I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyways, sharing codes is very unusual, and I'm... surprised that...
not really. I mean, they go to the same OEM as somebody else, and it's not like they're making their own infrared. But so quite a few AV receivers, they do have at least 2 sets of remote codes, and if one of them is interfering with another device, you switch it over to the alternate set of remote codes. Now, I looked it up in the Marantz manual, and they didn't have any mention of it in the Marantz, but his Lexicon did. His Lexicon does have a mention. It's on page 20 of its manual. And to get to it is not intuitive at all. You wouldn't find it if you didn't read the manual. You have to hold down the menu button on the front face of the Lexicon, not on the remote, the menu button on the front face, and you have to hold it for 4 seconds. And that brings up a hidden menu on the front panel. The first option is to factory reset. So that's how you would factory reset the Lexicon if you ever need to. And then the second option is to switch between 2 sets of remote infrared codes. So hopefully switching to the other one will
well, the other option is if you have like those individual little IR blasters that just go into each one, you could set it up that way. But that's a little...
That's assuming you have a Harmony, because you can't really buy them anymore, and have the little precision IR thingies to stick onto.
I should have picked one up.
The IR windows at the front of each individual AV receiver. So this you have on hand and is a setting that you can certainly try.
Yeah. So question number 3. As we know, Gary likes to purchase new gear and make changes to his multiple setups on a regular and ongoing basis. Recently, he brought an older receiver, Blu-ray player, and pair of speakers out of storage and set them up in one of his usual stereo listening spots across from his Lazy Boy. Very specific seat, but whatever. He popped in a CD and found himself rather startled. This old setup sounded really, really good. A quieter background and higher fidelity than what he's had in that spot for the past little while. So have you ever had a similar experience? Go back to some old gear and discover it actually sounds better than your newest equipment? I don't have any old gear just lying around here. I get rid of it immediately. I mean, I've had experience. You could say that I've done that with headphones quite a bit.
Okay.
Where I shuffle around headphones and that happens a lot. Like just on a day, just listening to the same content in my car, and then I'll put on headphones and do the yard, and I'll put on different headphones and do the and just work at my computer. It's all the same content, and it sounds vastly different from one set of speakers and headphones to the other. So I guess I could say it that way, but not what you're describing, Gary.
Yeah, I don't think I can really say it. Not in audio, and it's not exactly the situation, but in video, since I have my Sony Z9D LCD 75-inch in my theater, so naturally when I'm going on a movie spree, I'm watching that, and then when I go back to my living room and go back to my OLED, I'm like, oh, OLED. As good as the LCD is, and that Z9D is about as good as LCD's ever got. As good as that is, I'm like, oh yeah, OLED. So I have a little bit of that sometimes where I'm like, I get reminded that something I already own is that good. So that's about as similar as I can get.
Okay. Brandon has a
no D.
Brannon, sorry, no D. Sorry, Brandon. Brandon. I have a friend named Brandon, and this is going to throw me. So, Brandon, I apologize. You can blame my friend Brandon, but he's a firefighter, and he's built like a tank. So, be nice when you blame him. Brandon has an Epson 5040 UB projector and a Denon X4400H receiver. They're connected via 25-foot monoprice high-speed premium certified HDMI cable. Everything was fine for for at least the past year, but just recently he started having an issue where he powers everything up as normal, but then Epson won't show the image from any of his sources until he power cycles the X4400H. The Epson will show its own menus, so it's powered up and working. He didn't change anything. So any idea about what's going on and how to fix this annoyance? I mean, the first thing I would think is that it's a loose connection. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would think is if is this running in wall, and did you somehow pierce it?
But I mean, power cycling his Denon always works. So
yeah,
it's like it's a handshake issue, but why it would work for a year and then
work for a year and not later?
Stop.
Yeah. Firmware update, I guess, could have killed something. I guess. Do you have a Harmony remote? Because you could delay the power.
Yeah,
up
just made it slightly slower, right? Like
yeah.
I don't know if he's using a Harmony or some other remote where he's basically got a macro or an activity, presses the one button and everything powers up in sequence and goes to the desired inputs. And if you are using that, I mean, I completely believe you that you changed nothing, but there very well might have been a firmware update for one device or another that just added just enough delay that handshake isn't working anymore. So one thing you could try, if this is the scenario, if you even have a remote that is using an activity or macro, just make it so that there's a little bit longer delay between, you would press to power up the Epson first, and then have it wait a little bit before you power on the Denon. Because this does certainly just sound like it's a handshake. And, if turning the Denon off and back on again and everything works, I'm like, yeah, that's the handshake. The Epson is now fully powered up and it accepts the handshake after that power cycle. But on the first go around, it misses it. It just wasn't fully awake yet, seemingly. I don't know. That's
I guess the other possible explanation I can think of might be that, you upgraded your Netflix or something and now you're shooting 4K out of it or something, and that's somehow making a difference, but I really don't see how that could be the case.
Yeah, and it doesn't even really sound like the problem he was describing. So so I give it a try where you just simply have a longer delay between when the Epson is first powered on and then the Denon gets powered on.
And if you can't do that, then just literally create a macro that says that does everything it's supposed to do and then powers off and powers back on the receiver at the very end of it. Just tack that onto the end bit and do it that way. Yeah,
I don't know if maybe that 25-foot monoprice cable was an active HDMI cable. It's certainly possible at that length. And that, so I mean, the active cable is supposed to draw its power from the display device. They're labeled. You can't just interchange the two sides. They're labeled as display device and source device. So it's, like Tom said right at the beginning, it might just be a slightly loose connection, because Lord knows that happens with HDMI cables. It is just a friction fit, unfortunately. So if adding the delay doesn't work, then might try an HDMI cable swap. They're not too expensive, thankfully, for monoprice, even a 25-foot one.
Okay. So we mentioned how on Denon and Marantz receivers, if you push the pure listening mode button on the remote, somebody is really trying to get a hold of me.
Oh,
that phone has been blowing up.
Okay, well, once you read this, maybe I'll dig into this, and then you can go see what's up.
Yeah, so we mentioned how on the Denon Marantz receivers, if you push the pure listening mode button on the remote, you can select the auto listening mode. And if you understood what we said, that will always apply Dolby Surround upmixing to every Dolby signal and DTS Neural X upmixing to every DTS signal. Is that correct?
Yep, that's how it works.
It should be.
Other than Dolby Atmos and DTS X specifically, because those will come out as Dolby Atmos and DTS X. No upmixing applied to those, of course, because they already have the overhead information in the signal itself.
Right. So yes, but which mode does it use? Movie, music, or game? We said we recommend using game versions of both upmixers, correct? So can the auto listening mode do that? He wants all of his speakers making sound no matter what type of audio signal is playing, so it'd be a lot easier if he can just use the auto mode, but what would we recommend? Well, I mean, the solution to make sure that you get the game one is once you have selected game and then DTS:X or Dolby Surround, it will always put it to that forever going forward. So that's the, I guess, a little bit more tedious, but if you're looking for a single button press, Rob, what do you say? I'm gonna go check to see what's going on with my phone.
Sure. Yeah. So if you do press that pure listening mode button and cycle it to the auto mode, then yes, it'll apply Dolby Surround upmixing to any Dolby type signals, and it'll apply DTS Neural X upmixing to any DTS type signals. But it will default to the movie mode. Already kind of gave that away a couple of questions ago, but it is the movie mode version of those upmixers that it defaults to. So yeah. Since we do recommend the game version, you do need to manually press the game mode, listening mode button on your remote to do that. And you do, unfortunately, on each individual input for every type of signal, the first time that it comes in, you need to manually set it there, and then it'll remember from then on. So yeah, there might be some checking, especially when it's brand new, but that's the way to go. And the default is the movie mode. So I'll roll on into Jonathan with his SeaDen theater here. So this is a theater that we've visited a couple of times, but some reminder images, his blue and green walls and gray front wall. 3 TVs up there on the front wall. Tom's back now, so I've just rolled into Jonathan's question. Haven't read it yet. Just setting up the intro, and yeah, he's going to be installing a door on his back wall, which is something we recommended, and that is going to happen. And last time he was talking to us, he was asking about room treatment, so he's got an update and some more questions.
So Jonathan thanked us for our advice regarding how he should position acoustic treatments in the SeaDen theater. He intends to go with 1 freestanding panel in front of the sliding glass doors on the right wall, 2 panels on the left wall, 3 panels along the back wall once he has installed a door, and a couple more panels on the front wall. He'll also get a couple of tri-traps. He likes the idea of having them on the floor against the front wall below his center, as I suggested. As we know, GIK has quite a variety of panels and thicknesses. Which panels should he get? The spot panels that are exactly 2 inches thick, or the 2x2 panels that use 2-inch thick installation but are about 3.5 inches thick overall. So, a 2-inch panel directly on the wall is the same effectiveness as a 1-inch panel 1 inch off the wall. It's kind of the way to go about it.
Very close.
So your 2x2 panel is a 2-inch thick, which with a 2-inch-ish air gap. So it makes it as thick, as effective as a 4-inch panel that is directly on the wall.
Pretty close to it, yeah.
You are getting the effectiveness of a 4-inch panel that without having to pay for the 4 inches of insulation is what it kind of comes into.
And as we go thicker in panels, all it means is that it is absorbing to lower and lower frequencies the thicker that you go. And that is desirable because largely what we want to treat is the crossover region between our subwoofers and speakers. That's a big part of the region that we want to get to. And if you just have 2 inches of insulation directly against the wall, which is what the spot panel would be, that really only reaches down to, 250 hertz if you're optimistic. It's really closer to 500 hertz that it's very effective. And it's still got some effect down to about 250 hertz, but really nothing below that. Whereas if you go with the 242 panel, which is still 2 inches of insulation, but with an 1.5 inch air gap behind it, now that gets you down nicely into about 125 hertz. It's very effective down to 250, and then still effective somewhat down to 125. Now that's getting you getting you into the upper portion of that crossover region. Plus you're going to have your tri-traps to actually really get you down to that sort of 80 hertz level. So rule of thumb is as thick as you can go. If you could do the 4-inch of insulation with an 1.5 inch air gap, that would be even better for getting you to lower frequencies.
Right.
But it does start to get a little bit unwieldy in how thick those panels start to feel. So if at all possible, go with as thick as you can. The 242 panels, I would pretty much always get over the spot panels unless absolutely nothing thicker will fit.
Right. Art has an Integra DTR 7.8 receiver from back in 2007. It has HDMI 1.3. He's powering a 5.2 speaker setup with B&W M1 satellite speakers and a pair of B&W ASW 300 subs, which are 8-inch 100-watt ported subs. I don't know why they call them 300, because they ain't. He came across a marketplace deal for a Pioneer Elite SC-LX 501 for only $150. That's a 7.1 model with Pioneer's Class D amplification. It's got HDMI 2.0 and can pass through 4K 60 and Dolby Vision. I mean, you might be able to pass it through.
Yes, you can pass it
that's
through.
good. That's good. And it can do 5.2.2 Atmos and DTS X. For room correction, it has regular MCACC. The HDMI upgrade would help bring his system a little bit more up to date, but would he notice any sort of audio upgrade between the two receivers? We don't know the size of his room, but
we don't.
I wouldn't think so. I'll be honest with you. I don't really think that I would notice. The Class D amplifications in the Pioneer, I have not personally heard them. And I don't really remember how well they measured back in the day when they were doing these. I don't think they do them anymore, right? I think they're pretty.
No, Pioneer's still going with the Class D. It shouldn't be any problem with the B&W M1 satellites.
Right.
It has the classic thing where if you connect them to, it's not so much just low impedance speakers, it's speakers that have low impedance at high frequencies. That's where Class D amplifiers tend to struggle a bit, and the Pioneers were no different there. But that isn't the case with the speakers that you have. It really shouldn't be a problem. I would put it to you this way. If you just did manual speaker setup, so you manually set the distances and trim levels, and you manually set your bass management and crossovers, and that's all you did, and you compared your existing Integra to your Pioneer, like for like signals, because obviously the Integra that you have can't do Atmos, but let's just do Dolby Digital 5.1. Clearly they can both do that. I don't think you'd hear any difference. You wouldn't be getting any sort of inherent audio upgrade from going with the Pioneer. Now, if you use, in the case of the Integra going back to 2007, they were using Odyssey multi-Q.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that one was Odyssey Multi-Q XT, not XT32, but Multi-Q XT in that Integra that you have. So if you ran that, and then you ran MCACC on the Pioneer, you very well might hear a difference there between what the two different auto EQ systems do to the signal. I'm not a big fan of regular MCACC.
They had an upgraded version of it, but I don't
they have
remember that being
MCACC Pro.
Pro, right?
Yeah, but regular MCACC, I'm not a big fan of it. That said, it's easy enough to run it so that it sets your distances and levels, and then you just turn off the equalization part of it. It's easy enough to manually do EQ because it's got just the regular, band EQ,
right?
Not parametric, but just regular band EQ. So, I mean, it's easy enough to get around what MCACC does equalization-wise. So I would put it to you this way. I wouldn't go and buy the Pioneer for any type of audio upgrade. That's not the justification. Getting it for $150 so that you have HDMI 2.0, that's good enough. That's a good enough reason.
So I ran over to Accessories for Less, and their least expensive receiver is a Denon AVR S540 BT, which means Bluetooth.
Oh, okay.
5.2.
I mean, that doesn't have room correction of anything and tops out at 5 speakers, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's only got 5 speakers right now to begin with.
But it has no room correction at all.
Right. But it does pass through 4K.
Sure.
It does pass through
Dolby Vision.
It does all these things.
But how much is that?
$229. $230.
Right.
$230.
So, I mean, it's more expensive and less capable than the Pioneer Elite you're looking at. So, yeah, I mean, if it's really about getting HDMI 2.0, then I don't have, because you're not going to find anything cheaper than this.
No, not for $150. Yeah,
that still does 7 speakers and does Atmos and DTS:X. Granted, it tops out at 7 speakers maximum, but you can get a taste of it if you want to. So yeah, because it's so inexpensive, I wouldn't have any problem. But I wouldn't go buying it hoping that you're also going to get some kind of wow factor audio upgrade along with it. I wouldn't expect that whatsoever.
Yeah. All right, James. So James has been loving his Anthem MRX 740 receiver since it has Chromecast built in. He's enjoyed being able to cast from his Android phone directly without having to turn on his TV and without having to cast via his NVIDIA Shield. But for some unknown reason, it stopped working. His phone still lets him select the Anthem as the device he wants to cast to, and his phone seems to think it's casting out the audio, but no sound comes out of his speakers. It used to work seamlessly. Furthermore, he often has his NVIDIA Shield on. It's his main device for any video services. He used to be able to tell his phone to cast directly to the Anthem, and that Anthem would automatically switch from the Shield's input to its Chromecast input, but it doesn't do that anymore. So any ideas how to fix this? Nope.
So I do have an idea. You're not going to like it.
Okay. What's the idea?
So assuming this is similar to how a Chromecast works. Let's just say you had a Chromecast Ultra, or just one of those devices. Google's own advice. When you lose connection like this, of course they go through all the things. Make sure that your speakers still function with another source, because you want to make sure it's not the speakers that broke. Make sure that your phone still functions and all that. But if all that is the case, they tell you factory reset the Chromecast, and
so that means factory reset the receiver.
Factory reset the receiver. Now, one advantage of it being an Anthem is that all the setup for the Anthem is done through the web interface, and you can save your configuration. So thankfully, after you factory reset the Anthem, you can just load all of your settings back in. You don't have to rerun Anthem room correction.
This will answer the other question you probably have: is it the problem that there's something weird inside that with the factory reset will fix, or is it one of my settings? Because if you factory reset it and then try
reload
it and
the
it
settings,
works,
and it goes back to breaking again.
Right. So I would factory reset it just one time and then try to see if it works. And if it works, and then you upload your settings and it still works, well, something wonky went on there.
I mean, I have definitely... I'm using an iPhone, but I've got, like a Chromecast, and I've got an NVIDIA Shield, so those use casting, or that's an option, is to use casting. And I've done that, and I've had it where it's going along for a few days, and then, just dropped its connection, and usually rebooting my NVIDIA Shield or rebooting my Chromecast and rebooting my iPhone, usually that gets them to connect again. I don't know, maybe James hasn't rebooted his Android phone in a while. That's certainly an easy thing to try first. Just reboot the phone.
You see, so that's what I was going to suggest too, because like you're saying, what I usually do, because when we were moving around because of the house, we took a Chromecast with us, and occasionally everything would be going along swimmingly, and then my phone, one of the kids would use their phone, or somebody else would do something, and then my phone suddenly stops working. So I reset my phone, I unplug the Chromecast and plug it back in, and then you're good. I almost said Bob's your uncle, but I didn't say it. Take a drink. So that's a lot harder when you have built-in Chromecast. So yes, I think, so order of operation here. Power off and power back on your phone.
Yes.
Okay. Number one.
Fully unplug and then replug the AV receiver.
And I would unplug it and wait. For like 30 seconds, a minute, or whatever, just so that make sure that the whatever capacitors are keeping things going in there discharge. Then plug it back in. See if that fixes it. If that doesn't fix it, we're going to factory reset and checking. And if that doesn't fix it, well, then you should stop trying to cast things.
Because this was James, who I visited his place, and this was the one where out of the box, it was like, because it actually tells you to set things up through the Google Home interface. So he went into Google Home on his Android phone, and he's like, there's the receiver, and there it is, and nothing would work. And nothing worked until we factory reset the Anthem. So,
at least he knows how to do it then.
All else fails, unfortunately. I think that's what you might end up doing. But certainly do some full power cycling beforehand, because that's a lot easier.
All right. Michael. Michael's brother has slowly pieced together a home theater over nearly a decade. He finally added a pair of subwoofers just this last week. He's never bothered to run room correction until now. Michael is finally able to visit him, so he'd like to lend a hand. The receiver is a Marantz SR6009. It has Odyssey Multi-Q XT. In the back of Michael's mind, he recalls us saying that's one of the older versions of Odyssey, and it wasn't very good, and maybe should be avoided. Was it XT, or is that version okay to use? It's absolutely okay to use.
That version is very okay to use.
Yeah, Multi-Q 3D. What was it? What was the one? The other one.
2EQ.
2EQ. That was the one that
2EQ.
That was just
2EQ was garbage.
That was
2EQ.
That was the one that Onkyo said. Onkyo said, "Hey, this is how much processing power we're going to give you on our receivers, because we're cutting every cost we can to keep the price of our receivers down." And they said, Odyssey said, "Well, we can't do much with that." And they said, "Well, just do what you can." And that's what they did. 2EQ, and everybody went, "Well, it's got Odyssey on it, so it must be good." And everybody at home went, "Ugh."
Yeah, 2EQ did not equalize the bass at all, which is really where you want EQ the most. And then what it did in the mid-range treble was more harm than good. So that was one of the ones where you might use it to set your distances and levels, but then turn it off. But that was 2EQ, and you don't find 2EQ on anything modern anymore that you can buy.
Yeah.
Regular EQ, I am not super keen on. Now, if you have regular EQ...
I'm
okay with it. Yeah. If you have regular EQ and the Odyssey editor app, that's the one where I'm like, maybe you do curtain it off so that it doesn't touch the treble very much, because it doesn't have enough resolution to really do a good job in the mid-range and treble. So regular EQ, I'm kind of like, use it with the editor app and maybe curtain it off so it's only doing the bass. But XT's pretty good. I would have no problems running XT.
XT is only one step down from the best.
That's right.
I mean it's the precursor to the Sub EQ HT and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's. I'll tell you what, I was willing to spend more money on a receiver to get it. I mean, rather than just get the regular multi-Q, which is the last receiver I purchased had just multi-Q. I mean, I had the option. There was was lines.
It's the very reason I almost always try to get everyone to the X series of Denon, because everything in the X series has at least XT, if not XT32, whereas the S series is regular multi-EQ. So if at all possible, I try to get everyone to the X series and get that.
And it's all about how much power it has, how granular it can be, how many points that it can adjust and everything else. So just think of it as you're buying a bigger processor, because that's essentially what it is. He says, what steps should they take to get the most out of running Multi-EQ XT? Well, proper placement of your subwoofers and speakers is essential.
Beforehand. That's before you've run XT, is the physical stuff that you can do with the dual subs and the speakers. Yes.
And I am telling you, I cannot... My new mantra is, if you haven't acoustically treated your room, you shouldn't even be shopping for speakers, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you have no idea what you were going to hear.
Maybe front, left, right, just at the very beginning.
Well, even then, how many times have we been, I've been in a theater and I'm like, well, these sound terrible, and I know they're good speakers. Like, I know they're good speakers, but the room is so bright and so reflective that they sound terrible. So you need to get the positioning of your couch, the positioning of your speakers, the positioning of your subwoofers. That's got to be right. You need whatever acoustic treatments you can do. You should do that first. And there's lots of articles on AV Gadgets and other places that will tell you where to put all these things, and then you run Multi-Q XT. And
so I'll interject to say I do also have my 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers, and that is going to be done before you do any XT stuff. The aim of the 12-step guide is not to get you linear accurate bass. The aim of the 12-step guide is to get you bass that is as uniform across a 3-seat couch, because then Odyssey can do a good job of equalizing the bass, since it is pretty close to being the same ups and downs across those 3 seats. That's the goal of the 12-step guide, is to get you that uniformity. So that you're going to do beforehand. And you're going to make sure that you follow the guidelines for where to position your speakers and have your acoustic treatment set up. Now you go ahead and run Multi-QXT. It'll actually be really easy because the 2 subwoofer outputs on the back of the SR6009, that's just an internal Y splitter.
Yeah,
so
that's
all the
nice.
stuff I talk about in the 12-step guide about using a Y splitter or daisy chaining, don't have to do that. You can actually plug in both of the subwoofer outputs on the back of the SR6009, one to each sub, because it's an internal Y splitter inside of there, so that makes that part easy.
Does it level match the subs though?
No, just as a single. It's a mono signal coming out of there.
Oh, really? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So then we can point you to AV Gadgets because Tom wrote up a great guide on proper microphone positioning. That applies to any of the room correction programs, but it certainly applies to Odyssey, and you quote Chris Kyriakakis from Odyssey in there a few times in that article. So I mean, to give some very simple pointers, please read the article because it's got more details, but some very simple pointers are that the microphone is pointing straight up at the ceiling. You're
Always.
not aiming the microphone at any given speaker at a time, pointing straight up. Use a tripod. Don't handhold it. Don't rest it on the backrest. Use a tripod, and you should have a bubble, a 1-foot bubble of air all around that microphone. And I know it says put it approximately where your head would be, and you're like, well, my head's right against the backrest. Don't put the microphone right against the backrest. A 1-foot bubble of air all around that microphone. That's really key. If you do that, tripod, microphone pointing straight up, bubble of air around the microphone, and then don't move the microphone too much. Keep it in about a 2-foot radius from that first position. And the first position is right in between, equidistant from your front, left, and right speakers, even if you don't actually have a seat right there, even if your primary seat is a little bit off center, because I don't know, you've got a love seat, or you've got 2 recliners with an armrest in the middle. If the armrest in the middle is the point where it's equidistant from the front, left, and right speakers, that is mic position number 1, and then keep it within about a 2-foot radius of that. That's really all the tips you need.
Right, and that's the hardest part too, because
It is.
People just, I'm like, it's got to be. I know no one sits there. Like in my couch, smack dab center is sitting a little bit on the crack between two of the seats in my, because I have 3 seats in my massive 10-foot wide couch. It's only 3 seats, so each one's like a butt and a half, maybe 2 butts depending on the size of your bottom. Each of these seats. So and it's pushed up against one wall, so it's a little bit off center. So and that's what I'm doing. I'm taking the measurements there, and honestly, I sit there. That's where I sit. I sit right there, with a little bit of the crack going up the left side of the crack of the couch, going a little bit up the left side there. You know what? I've gotten used to it. I'm kind of comfortable there now because that's the good spot. That's where I want to be.
And we absolutely know and sympathize. You look at the diagrams and they're like, look, all the microphone positions are in seats. It sure looks like that on the diagram.
Yeah. And all the speakers are pointed directly at the microphone too.
We wish it didn't look like that. We don't blame anybody who sees that and goes, well, clearly, no, it's not intuitive. This is what we're describing is the way to do it. And if you have a second seat that's way over on the left wall and facing sideways, the microphone doesn't go there at all.
Ever.
All right? I know it's a seat. I know somebody might sit there. You don't measure there. Keep it in like a 2-foot radius bubble.
Believe it or
around
not,
that first position.
Believe it or not, that sound for that person over there is actually going to get better as well. It might not be get that much as good as it's going to be where you are at, but chances are it's also going to get better there. It won't be great. But it will be better if you just do it the way we tell you to do it. I know that it's just I know it doesn't make sense. It's like one of those math things, where people are, like I was having a discussion with somebody about riding motorcycles the other day, and he's a longtime motorcycle rider. I said, you know how when you're riding a motorcycle and you want to turn left, you push right. And he looked at me like I had lost my mind. And I was like, no, that's how you do it. He goes, no, that's not how you do it. I'm like, how do you do it? He goes, I just turn. I'm like, next time you're riding and you're not going slow, you're going like a reasonable speed. It doesn't have to be that fast, just a reasonable speed. You will notice that when you turn left, you push the left handlebar to the right, and you kind of turn the wheel that way. So you're turning a little bit right, and it turns you left. It dips the motorcycle that way. And he's like, no, I don't. I'm like, you do. Okay, it's science, and there's like I've seen all the graphs, and I can't explain the math behind it, but I've seen all the graphs about how it changes the angles, and then the tires and the canter of the road and everything. I don't know. It works. This works. Take our word for it. Chris, so we previously told Chris to use the settings listed by projector reviews for his Epson 50 UB projector. I did not say that. Rob said that, so don't blame me.
I did.
He had a look at them and tried to follow what they've written, but to be honest, he's having a hard time making sense of it all. Some of it feels as though you need to speak calibrator to know whether you should apply it to your own projector or not. Some portions really seem as though they'd be specific from unit to unit, and that you need to measure with some sort of color meter or something to get the right settings. So could we lay it out in simple terms, which settings you should follow and which settings are better left to a professional calibrator? And since it's going to come up when we start describing the settings they've listed, Projector Reviews has given 3 groups of settings: best mode for 1080p, best mode for 4K HDR, and brightest mode for 4K HDR. How does he know whether he should use the best or the brightest settings for HDR, and why have both? Well, we've already kind of just touched on this when we talked about that OLED earlier, but the brightest modes are for when you don't have as much light control or light control at all. When you have full light control, then the best mode is, and that's what the best modes always are. The best mode is, assuming you have full light control, this will get you the blackest blacks and the most contrast.
There's one other factor in the case of this Epson, which is that it actually has a physical color filter that can be applied in some of the picture modes, and that widens the color to the full DCI P3 color gamut. It's there's wider colors. Red's a little bit deeper, blue's a little bit deeper, green's a little bit deeper in DCI P3. So the best picture mode is exactly as Tom's saying, assuming a pitch black room where the maximum light output is not the key thing, and it gives you that wider color that comes along with HDR, whereas the brightest settings for HDR is just, let's get as many lumens out of this thing as we can. The color filter is not in place because, of course, a physical color filter does reduce the amount of light that comes out. So you don't get as wide color. You're sticking with the Rec 709 color from HD, not going to the DCI P3 color of 4K and HDR, but you get more lumens out of it. So that's why they give you the 2. Because they're saying, okay, sometimes you just need all the lumens you can get, and we're going to sacrifice some wide color and some of the deepest black levels to get there. But if you've got the ideal environment, we'll give you the widest color and the deepest black. So that's the 2 options for the 4K HDR settings. So I am just going to show on the YouTube video, and if you're looking at the pictures on the Flickr album instead, then you can follow along a little bit here. But thankfully, it's not too complicated. But I completely understand what Chris is saying, because if you don't speak calibrator, if this is all brand new to you, it is not evident which of these tables you should follow and which ones you should say, I better leave that alone. So we're going to start with the 1080p Rec 709 standard dynamic range. They suggest using the natural picture mode as your starting point, and thankfully it's really close out of the box. But they do have some tables that are below there in there. Now, the first set of tables are your pretty standard picture settings, your contrast and brightness, color tint, color temperature, gamma. And honestly, if you're looking at the table, you'll notice that there's barely any changes to make out of the box. They did lower the gamma setting a little bit to bring it closer to the pitch black target of a gamma of 2.4. You might not want to put it to that setting. If your room is a little bit lighter, if your walls are lighter color, you might be happier leaving the gamma where it is, or maybe at the -1 setting instead of the -2 setting. So that isn't strict. That's for a really pitch black room is what they've set there. But almost everything else, other than they turned off all the things like the noise reduction and yeah, that's about it. They turned off the noise reduction. Everything else is pretty much left in those standard settings. So those you can follow, and there's not much to change. It's very easy to follow those. Below that, though, they start getting into some of the color settings. And here, I would say it's okay to go with the first graph, which is just red, green, and blue, gain and offset. That is what we would call a 2-point color calibration. And those ones are pretty universal across any Epson 5050 UB unit that you'll get. Those ones, you need to increase some blue down at the bottom and increase some red up at the top. And that's pretty universal. That's like with the lamp that they use. So that's not so much like it is on some LCD TVs where it varies a lot from unit to unit. This is pretty inherent to the lamp that's being used by any Epson 5050 UB. So that one there, just the 2-point, the RGB custom, I would go ahead and use that. then I wouldn't touch anything else. Don't touch the grayscale. Don't touch anything that is on the next page, which is the advanced calibration where they dig into the color management system. Don't touch those. Those need to be measured with a color meter, a colorimeter. Those need to be either done by a professional calibrator or you need some software and a meter to do those. So it's the same situation with the HDRs. If you want what they call the best mode, which is the pitch black mode with the widest color, they start with the digital cinema mode. That matches as close as you can to a professional digital cinema. Start with that as your picture mode. And again, if we look at the first set of settings, they've actually increased the contrast, and I would go ahead and follow that. But other than that, very little. They bumped the color temperature down 1 notch and bumped the skin tone up 1 notch, and I'd go ahead and follow that too. But other than that, turning off the noise reduction, there's like nothing else to do. Again, the 2-point, the RGB custom, where there's just red, green, and blue, gain and offset, go ahead and follow those, but then nothing else. Don't touch the grayscale. Don't touch the CMS on the next page. For the brightest mode, if you even want to use it, I don't know, maybe your room's always pitch black, then you don't need the brightest 4K mode. But that's where they're saying, okay, if you just need all the lumens you can get and we're sacrificing the wide color, they're using the natural HDR mode. And same thing, follow the first set of settings in the first 2 tables, follow the red, green, and blue, gain and offset, but nothing else. And yeah, don't even look at the next page, the advanced calibration settings. Don't even look at it. It's going to lead you down a primrose path.
Okay. Let's see here. The projector reviews didn't supply any settings for the 3D picture mode because
they didn't do it.
Only Rob uses it. It's just you and Rob. That's it. So what should you use for 3D, Rob?
So there are only, once you've activated a 3D picture, then you can choose, there's only 2 picture modes to choose between, 3D dynamic and 3D cinema. And you get one guess as to which one is closer to accurate, with the names being dynamic and cinema.
Let me think. Yeah.
Now, take the 3D cinema mode, go back to the best for 1080p settings. It's all the same. All right, you're starting at 3D cinema because there's no other choice other than 3D dynamic, and we don't want to use that. Then all the other settings that are available, they're identical to the best for 1080p settings, because 3D is not in 4K, it is not in HDR, and it's identical to the natural picture mode when you're watching 1080p standard dynamic range. So thankfully, that one's pretty simple too.
Okay. John has a plan for a pair of DIY custom-built subs. He intends to use the Skar audio VXF15 dual 4-ohm voice coil 15-inch woofer in each of them. So
just rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, just right there. So it's a 15-inch driver with 4-ohm. Whatever, doesn't matter.
4-ohm impedance, but it has dual voice coils because, as we'll discover, it was meant originally for car audio, where you would be feeding it a left and right signal. There is no dedicated subwoofer signal in a car audio setup, so it would be getting the left and right signals, and so it has 2 sets of binding posts and 2 voice coils so that it can play the bass from 2 channels simultaneously. That's why it's like that.
So it's marketed as a car subwoofer with their 1,500 watts RMS, power handling. John is working off plans and suggestions found on StereoNet forums. They call for a ported box with 2 cubic feet of internal volume. He's planned for cabinets that will be 48 inches tall, 12 inches wide, and 22 inches deep, with a long winding port inside that will give the cabinets a 20 hertz resonant port frequency. I do not build speakers, so I have no idea if this is a good idea or not. So let's just go with that.
Yes.
I do know that these ports are usually flared. It looks like he's flared the top, but I don't know what's going on at the bottom there. So he will power the subs with a Crown XLS 1502 amp. He intends to wire one channel of the Crown amp in parallel to both voice coils of each driver, which would create dual 2-ohm loads. The Crown amp specs that can can output 775 watts times 2 into 2 ohms. So that's 775 watts times 2 and 2 ohms. Mm-hmm. All right. The plans on StereoNet include some measurements of the electrical impedance when the Skar driver is put in this 2 cubic foot ported box. All by itself, the driver naturally resonates at around 35 hertz, and the 2 cubic foot box naturally resonates at around 55. So with the driver and box combined, we see an we see large electrical impedance spikes at the port and cabinet resonances. Plus, there would be some ripples around 35 hertz where the driver itself naturally wants to resonate if the graphs were not smooth. The plans say this subwoofer design can be run from 17 hertz to 150 hertz, but Skar's own recommendation on their website suggests using an even larger box and giving it a port tuning of 32 hertz. So John wants to know. I already tell you I don't know the answer to this. If he just connects his crown amp to this design without any filters in place, is that going to be a problem? Yes. Should he set high pass and low pass filters with steep slopes? Should they be at 17 hertz and 150 hertz as stereo net suggests? I don't think you need to worry much about the top end one, since you're going to have a filter on your receiver is going to do that for you anyways. You're not going to
except that this wild impedance swing that it has is happening like at 50 hertz.
Right.
Because that's just where this 2 cubic foot box is
right.
resonating.
So what you're basically saying is I'm just going to hook this bad boy up and let her go. Right. Without any crossover filtering, anything going on. Nothing. And when I say crossover, I don't mean crossover. I mean like any DSP happening.
Right.
Because what happens, like if you took the amp out of a SVS, or HSU or power sound audio, it's not just this makes power and we connect it to the driver.
Raw linear amp. Yeah.
They look at all these different things that you have apparently identified, and they would say, okay, we need to adjust things so that we get linearity out of this subwoofer beforehand. So how could you do that? Well, the solution would be a mini DSP between your receiver and this crown amp. You would want to put the mini DSP there so that you could essentially create calling it a crossover is wrong, but create a DSP filter so that when you are playing sounds out of this thing, that it is not going to go into oscillate. It's not going to have all these unlinearities happening throughout the entire frequency range. That's the solution. Honestly, I mean, I am not a speaker designer. I am not somebody who was a DIY guy in this sense. I don't know how much of ability you have to do all these things, but if your first thought is I'm just going to connect it up and see how it goes, I would very much encourage you to do a lot more research and make sure that because if not, you very much risk. I mean, the driver itself is over $300. I mean, it's not a cheap driver, and then you're going to be putting all this work into it. I would want to make sure I have a really, really good plan. And if you aren't comfortable, designing the DSP side of it, either somebody has already done it and can give you their settings for the mini DSP, or maybe get a kit that is a little bit more user friendly that will not require you to have to do all this stuff manually.
Yeah, because I mean he's done a fair amount of research in that he got these plans from the forum and he's following along someone else's guidelines, and they're saying this is what they did and it's functioned. Now, I mean, if you have a big spike in electrical impedance, the odds of that hurting anything in the system is really, really low. I mean, you can crank the electrical impedance of something up, and all it's going to mean is that not as much current gets through. That's all that means.
That's all that means, yeah.
In terms of harming something, it's not likely. But you're saying, well, why do we have these big spikes, right? We take the driver and just put it in free air and attach it to a linear amplifier, and you get this big electrical impedance spike right at where the driver itself just wants to naturally resonate. Well, that's because naturally it's moving a whole lot with very little power, so to move it to either side just from inertia, right? Because it's a sweep that gets played. So right at that peak resonance, it's like, oh, I'm moving all day from hardly any power, but moving it to either side, you have to put a bunch of grunt into it because it naturally just wants to stay where, just from inertia, it just wants to stay where it naturally resonates. So we see that normally. And then when we put it into a ported box, so actually first I'm showing the graph where it's in a sealed box, and that's where you just see, okay, 2 cubic foot sealed box, the the thing down at the bottom is gone because it's just mechanically damped now. It doesn't get to resonate down at 35 hertz where it wants to anymore because it's just damped by the air trapped in a sealed box. But the box naturally resonates around 50, 55 hertz. And so again, we see that same thing. More sound wants to come out with less power. So to move it off of that inertia, you have to put some grunt in from the amplifier.
Right.
Now that's fine. You're not going to hurt anything. But if it goes crazy high, you can get into a situation where you get non-linearity, right? It's not going to hurt anything, but it's going to sound non-linear. So when we see this plan where it's a 20 hertz port tuning, and that kind of moved the resonance down from 35 hertz, which is the driver in free air, down to where the port resonates, and now we're seeing that, that's not really any type of issue. It's going to be fine. You're going to get lots of output from not as many watts right down there at 20 hertz. But then what was measured by the person who did this 2 cubic foot ported box is an insanely high electrical impedance up at 50 hertz. And that to me is like, I'm not sure I want to put this thing in a ported box, to tell you. Because I mean, Skar themselves kind of recommend putting in a sealed box. And ironically, if you put it in a sealed box that's just barely big enough to hold the driver, that's going to have a box resonance that's so high that you'll be able to easily use like an 80 hertz crossover without the box resonance being down into the bass range. So, I mean, that's why when you see most other subwoofer brands and you see their sealed models, a lot of them, the sealed box is just barely big enough to hold the driver. And that's exactly that reason. It's to get away from this resonance of the cabinet itself imposing this, you end up with this huge phase shift and electrical impedance swing where the box naturally wants to resonate and the amplifier has to do some weird things. Typically becomes nonlinear. So I wouldn't do this completely unfiltered. I would expect that to get linear response out of the design that you've chosen. You're going to need to apply some EQ.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem. It's not a safety issue. It's not like that. It's just that I would be conservative and do it in trial and error in stages. I would basically start with a high pass filter at about 30 hertz where the driver wants to resonate anyway, and maybe a low pass filter at like 50 hertz. You've got, at present, your subwoofer's playing a 20 hertz range, and being car audio, that's not out of the realm of what it might have been designed to do because they really just want the kick drum and nothing else.
Right.
Your one note sub. The other thing is when you see massive electrical impedance swings like this, it indicates that the driver is very, very compliant. It means that the driver is very, very easy to move. And again, everything that Skar wrote about that driver lines up with that because we avoided a stiff rubber surround, went with like a far more compliant foam surround, and everything is like, this driver is super easy to move, and everything lines up with that description. So I would be conservative. I would do it little by little, and you're probably going to see some crazy group delay down at the bottom because that driver is just moving willy-nilly along with whatever the port resonates. And up at the top end, you might see some non-linearity that needs to be corrected as you go. So I wouldn't just start with 17 hertz to 150. It's not that it can't do it. It's not that you're going to break anything if you do, but I would do it little by little. That would be my only advice, just given all the measurements that have been provided to us.
Okay. I wouldn't do it at all, but that's just me.
Okay. I mean, he seems very set on doing this in his emails.
That's fine.
So
that's fine.
That's
I like
okay.
the idea of putting it into a sealed box, though. I think
it makes life easier. I gotta tell you,
it'll make things a little bit easier there for you. Now you won't get quite the output, but just the raw output from it. But
yeah,
I don't know.
But he wants the raw output because now we're going to see his room.
Yeah, so he'll be using these dual subs in a room that's 15 feet wide by 40 feet long by 8 feet high. The theater area is at the front of the room in the 15 by 15 section, and then there's a kitchenette taking up the back half of the room. His previous subs were a pair of 12-inch clips Synergy. He had them on either side of a sofa, which produced no nulls at any of the seats. He was thinking he'd put these new DIY subs on either side of the sofa as well, but do you realize how big these things are? I'm sorry.
I know. They're 4 feet tall. Towers.
They're like a child standing on either side of you, and they're not that thick either. They're like 12 inches by 22, it feels very tippy to me.
I know. Right?
Very tippy. Are you going to bolt them to the ground? I don't know. He was thinking he'd put these new DIY subs on either side of the sofa as well, but where do we think would be the best locations to use as a starting point? I cannot see this picture. I don't know what I am looking. Oh, I see it now. That yellow box is the theater area.
That's the theater area. Kitchen.
I would
behind it.
Put both of them behind your theater area. midpoints of the side walls.
That is exactly my thought, too. Yeah, I mean, I know it's going to seem a bit weird to have both of these subs behind your theater, both of them out of the theater area.
I would also not make them 12 inches wide. What are you thinking? That this is like to slide underneath the couch is what these seem to be built for. To me, I look at these and I'm like, this is to slide underneath a very high couch or maybe put it inside of a riser.
Snug into a corner somewhere and barely be noticed.
No, this box needs to be redesigned in some way so that you can put them on the ground and they won't fall over.
You can make it quite a compact sealed box. It's a lot less material.
I feel like if I threw a ball for my dog and it hit one of these things, it would knock it over.
Now, if they're standing against the midpoints of the two side walls, that's not so bad. I mean, they are so narrow that you're not going to really worry about bumping into them. So yeah, I would go the midpoints of the two side walls, the physical midpoints. Forget about theater area and versus kitchenette. The base has no idea that you've delineated those things for purpose. It just sees the entire 15 by 40 foot area, so 20 feet along each side wall. That's where I would start.
Yeah. So he's interested in using RumiQ Wizard to create a house curve for his base. That curve looks like this. goes way up at the bottom end. I'll let you with the bet.
Be a little bit careful. Do it gradually.
So he's interested in using RumiQ Wizard to create a house curve for his base. Is there any way he can create his desired house curve ahead of time? Or can you only create the house curve in RumiQ Wizard's equalizer after you've measured an actual subwoofer playing in your room? Well, this is way putting the horse before the cart. I mean, this is far. And honestly, I just watched most of a tutorial on how to use mini DSP and create house curves and stuff like that, which means you are planning to get a mini DSP, right? I mean, that's the only way that this works.
Yep.
So you're already planning on doing some EQing, so that's good. But the house curve didn't seem to be the complicated part of this whole process.
Yeah, that's actually fairly easy to apply after the fact.
I mean, you're like I'm going to spend 17 hours measuring these things, but I want to do I want to do that
the last
10
part
minutes,
first.
the 10 minutes in that towards the end there. I want to do that first. It's like okay, I mean, not saving any time, but I guess whatever.
But
do you.
To answer as wrote, RumiQ Wizard does give you the ability to program a house curve that you can just then import and apply to any other equalizer settings after the fact. So if you just want to get it prepared ahead of time, they do allow you to do that. It's not visual in any way, and you have to know what you want. But if you go to the preferences, they actually have a tab right there that is labeled House Curve. So guess what that's for? And they have instructions in there that make it fairly easy to understand, but like I say, it's not visual and it's not super intuitive. So all you're actually going to do is open like Notepad or anything else that will save as a text file, a .txt file. That's all we're doing is a text file. All we're going to put into that text file is we're going to start with the lowest frequency that we want to correct. So in his case, it's probably going to be 17 hertz. And you're just going to put in 17. You're not going to put hertz or anything, just 17, just the frequency. It can be a decimal if you want, but just the frequency, a space, nothing else. And then how many decibels you want to boost or cut it. You put a negative sign if you want to cut it, or just leave it alone, no plus sign. You just leave it alone, and just the number. You're not going to put in dB. It's going to assume dB. Again, you can do one decimal place if you want to. So if you say, okay, mine is going to be a gradual curve from 80 hertz down to 17 hertz, and it's going to rise and rise as we go lower, then maybe at 17 hertz, I have a 9 dB boost. So all you're going to type is 17 space 9. That's it. Hit enter, go down to the next line. And if it is just from 80 down to 17, you can just type 80 and then 0, a space 0. And you can choose whether it's a linear rise from 0 dB boost to 9 dB boost from 80 to 17, or logarithmic. And you would pretty much always choose logarithmic. You don't normally just want a linear, a straight line going there, a slant. You normally want a curve. So that's really all you need to do. Now, if you want to put in some specific things in between there, you want it to rise 3 dB at from 80 to 45, and then an additional 6 dB from 45 to 17. Well, you just put a 17, 9, 45, 3, 80, 0. That's it. One frequency on each line, and that's it. And you can set that up ahead of time, and then it's there and imported, and it will be applied to your equalizer.
Let us know how it works out for you, man.
Yeah.
I know. I've been a little tongue in cheek this time. But.
I was definitely feeling in his emails he was mostly wanting me to just say, "Yeah, you're good to go." I feel like he was mostly looking for confirmation because he was following somebody else's plan by everything that I could discern. I have a few little hesitations, and I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be a little bit careful. Go gradually.
I don't know. This is probably just my own insecurities, but I feel like this feels like a project that the questions are general enough that makes me concerned that maybe we've bitten off a little bit more than we can chew here. I might be dead wrong, and if I am, I apologize. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings or anything or challenge your technical prowess or anything. I'm just concerned. I don't want you to end up with a big pile of MDF and a driver and an amp. And go
because the indications are there that you might end up with a sub that is wicked loud between 30 and 50 hertz, and then hard to wrangle outside of those two areas. That wouldn't be super surprising.
Yeah. All right, Jack, and I guess thanks to Jay for reminding us that it's a coffered ceiling that Rob couldn't remember the correct name of last week. That Jack's got the ceiling with the beams in it. And
that's right.
It's got
a crisscross pattern of soffits up there on a ceiling. So yes, coffered ceiling. I forgot the term. Thank you, Jay, for reminding.
Thank you. Anyways, but this is Jack's room, and we've talked about it before. He's got the little hardwood floor everywhere, and the screen up front, and the 6,000 woofers.
4 sets of 6 drivers each for his subs.
Yes, for his subs that are built into the walls, basically. So Jack went ahead and sold his BenQ HT5050 projector rather than dealing with lowering it via a ceiling extension pole or raising his screen higher than he really wanted. He got the Epson 5050 UB to replace it, and it's got enough lens shift to fit exactly the way he wants. There you go.
Very good.
Nothing money can't fix in this solution. So he's using a Harmony remote with the Harmony hub, but the hub and its IR blaster extensions are all within his equipment closet. He thought the charging base for the remote was also an IR blaster, but that doesn't seem to be the case. No, that is not the case. Was he mistaken about that? Yes, I think you're mistaken about that. I don't think that thing does anything but just charge.
Yeah. There is IR that comes out of the remote itself.
Yes, in fact, it's right by where your finger would be on the back of it. You can feel the little window.
Yeah, but the charging base is not an IR blaster.
Yeah. So you can point the remote itself at the Epson, but it's a bit hit or miss on catching all the commands since it's directly above his seats and basically recessed within the coffered ceiling. He ran conduit from his equipment closet to the projector's location so he can pull any sort of cable quite easily. He was wondering if he might be able to use Ethernet, though, and control the Epson via IP using the Harmony hub. What do we say? I say that those little IR blasters work really, really well, and all you need to do is find some place on that front wall that has a line of sight to your projector and just sort of poke it out a little bit, because you would be shocked how quickly, like I've got mine. So mine's on like within 6 inches of the ceiling, and it's on a shelf. And the shelf is solid, right? So and it's pretty much on the edge of the shelf, but not quite. And my IR blaster, like the big one that you get, there's the little ones and there's the big one. My big one is on the ground, just lying there. And sometimes it gets kicked over upside down. Okay, so now it is on the ground, upside down, underneath the shelf and everything else. And even then, 75% of the commands go through.
Right.
So I believe that this is a problem that is not needing a solution as complicated as you're looking for. Just get one of the little IR blaster thingies, poke it out on the top of your projector screen someplace in the front of that room so that it has a line of sight of your projector, and you should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, because he said so you've got the Harmony hub, the base itself, which is the biggest IR blaster, and then it comes with 2 mini blasters that plug in to the back of the hub. And the way he said it in his email, it sounded like he was using all 3 of those inside of his equipment closet. That shouldn't be necessary. If you do have like solid shelves and you're thinking that that's blocking it, just put something a little bit reflective on like the front face of your equipment closet or the back face of your equipment closet, including like just some flat aluminum foil that will act as a mirror. And that IR will bounce all around your equipment closet and reach all of those devices. You shouldn't need to use all 3.
You can't see it, but it's going to look like a disco ball.
Yeah.
IR.
and it's hidden in your equipment closet, so who cares what it looks like on the inside? So that can be a very cheap and easy fix. Now, if it involves running, so the little mini IR blasters, they actually use a 2.5 millimeter jack.
Yeah.
It's not a 3.5 millimeter jack. It's the even smaller 2.5 millimeter. And it's usually kind of hard to find 2.5 millimeter extension cables. That's not a very typical thing, but it's quite easy to find 3.5 millimeter extension cables, and then you can just use a 3.5 to 2.5 adapter. So is how you could do it. So that you could pull through the conduit if you needed to, or like Tom says, I'm not exactly sure where the equipment closet is located in this room, but if you can have one of those IR blasters poking out somewhere into the theater area, because it's just a light. It's a light our human eyes can't see, but it's just a light, and as long as the blinking pattern of the light can reach the IR receptor in there, just like flashing a strobe light in a room if it were visible light, and they are bright. Those little IR blasters that the Harmonies use are bright, so it doesn't take much. So this is definitely doable. Is there a way to IP control it? There is like a
RS-232 probably. I'm
there's an RS-232,
but that's
I don't know how to program all that stuff with the Harmony.
You start doing that, you might as well talk to Control 4 people or Crestron or something, because that's
and then there's getting the activities to actually work with it. So there's definitely a way to make this work with just the infrared, and that's what we would suggest.
So he has a couple of lens memory slots in the Epson so they can easily switch between image sizes and aspect ratios. Is there a way to attach a given lens memory to a Harmony activity so it can be a single button press? There has to be a unique code within the IR. So there's two ways of doing this. There either has to be a unique code within the IR framework for the custom slot that you've chosen, or you have to program in the button controls and just pray that nothing goes wrong. Those are the two ways of doing it.
Harmony calls it a sequence. Former Universal remotes would have called it a macro. But they call it a sequence. Now, there's one little wrinkle in programming a sequence in a Harmony remote, which is that you can only program a sequence within an activity. You cannot create a sequence for a device and then use that sequence across all activities. Unfortunately, you have to program the sequence within each activity individually. And if it's a whole bunch of button presses, it's tedious because you have to do it over and over again for each activity you have. You have to program the same sequence, but you can create a sequence. Once the sequence is created, you can have that sequence automatically run at the end of pressing the activity button. So that's one way to do it. Or you can just have the sequence as a single button on your touch screen of the remote. And anytime you want to change the lens memory, you just hit whichever sequence is associated with that, what you want as far as where the screen moves. So that's two ways of doing it. But either way, you're going to create a sequence within each activity. And it might be multiples of them, so this could be tedious. But then you can have that run automatically at the end of your activity press, or just leave it there on your touchscreen.
This is an argument for running a individual blaster back to your projector and putting it right on the IR receiver though of your projector. So before, if you're just worried about turning it on and off and maybe doing some controls every once in a while, that's one thing. But if you're going to be programming these sequences and doing it, I think it would be worth it to you to run a cable all the way back there to make sure that there's nothing that can go not nothing. There's the very little that can go amiss when you are trying to make this work. So that would be an argument for doing it the other way.
Yeah, and he's got a conduit, so he can.
Yeah, so for taking Room EQ Wizard measurements, he's using a Microsoft Surface tablet, does not have an HDMI output, so he's using a USB-C to HDMI adapter. When he plugs it into his Marantz, he can choose the Marantz as his audio output device for Windows, and he can set it up to output 5.1 or 7.1 instead of stereo, which is what the steps say. But when he goes into Room EQ Wizard, it only ever outputs left or right. He's tried installing the ASIO for all drivers that we talked about in our tutorial. Not he. But those didn't seem to help. Is it his particular USB-C to HDMI adapter, as in a different adapter might work, or is it just a Surface thing and he needs to use a different computer? This sounds like a different computer issue is what it sounds like to me. It sounds like a full laptop, but this is Windows, and if as much as I get mad at Apple for all the things that they have done to me over the years, all the slights. Microsoft, at least Apple, usually when you plug something in, it goes, I know what you are, and it works, which is the benefit of having a Macintosh or an Apple product. So even the instructions Rob gave on the Windows, setting up the 7.1, 5.1 was a lot of change the settings, exit out, go back in, see if they stuck. If they didn't, do it again. Go back out. Stick this time. Yeah, okay. Then change this other one. See if it messed anything up. Go back out. Come back in. So it was a little bit of that. So I'm guessing it's a combination of those two things. Maybe needing a different, an actual dedicated laptop and not just this USB-C adapter, or just you need to keep going in and out until it remembers what you said. Yeah,
because honestly, I'm not sure. I do not know the answer to this with any sort of confidence. If you are able to, in Windows, in just the Windows sound output, get that to recognize your Marantz and output 7.1 audio to it, it makes me think that there should be some way for the ASI overall drivers to do it, but they are different drivers, right? Like in the Windows sound output settings, those are Windows drivers. Right. That's what's doing that. And then ASIO for all is actually bypassing those to do its own thing and send things out separately. And I just don't know if that works over USB-C full stop, or if it does work over USB-C, if it works over a USB-C to HDMI adapter. I really just don't know.
The first thing I would do if I were you is I would do a search online to see if people, and maybe just try it for yourself, if they can put in a Blu-ray or something into there, or they can stream 5.1 or 7.1 audio from their Surface through a USB adapter into that receiver. So because if that works, you should be able to do the rest of it.
But this is the ASI overall drivers in Room EQ Wizard. It's a whole other thing. So, I mean, what I would try to do is so make sure this is in Room EQ Wizard we're talking about, nothing else. In Room EQ Wizard, you're in the preferences, you're in that first setup part that I was talking about for making sure that you're selecting the correct outputs and inputs. Make sure that you have selected ASIO, that you've selected ASIO for all, and then reload, and you might need to reload more than once. And then when you open the ASIO for all control panel after reloading, maybe more than once, if it lists, so because the thing is, it won't even tell you that it's the Marantz. It'll be like USB audio out, something along those lines. But as long as that's listed, if that isn't listed, if the USB-C output isn't listed in the ASIO for all control panel, then this isn't going to work. Like it has to at least be listed. Now, getting it to then activate after it's listed can be some trial and error of trying it, clicking OK, then reloading, then checking it again, because half the time it doesn't stick. It's a really finicky, stupid thing. But yes, I'm not sure at all, but you have to at least be able to see your USB output as the device within those ASIO for all control panel.
All right, it is 2:00 and I got to go. So
Okie dokie.
Who do we have left?
Let me see here. We got Francis, Reginald, Bertrand, and Nathan. And I think that's it. Is that it? That is it. Those are the four names. So unless I got a whole bunch of questions that came in on Monday. So we got a packed show next week too. I should remind Tom that I can't record on Tuesday next week, but I'm free on Monday if Monday works. So hopefully we'll figure something out.
I don't know. You're going to have to hit me up, man. I don't know.
Yep.
I will say that I'm very hot in my home theater right now. It's very hot. In case DJ was wondering.
That's right.
I'm sweltering. I'm sweating in here. All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 125 patrons over at patreon.com, including Niels and Bertrand.
Indeed, patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 125 patron Niels and Bertrand. Thank you for being two of them. For anyone who would like to make a one-time donation, just come to the website, avrant.com, and on the right-hand side, it says support AVRant. It'll take you to PayPal.
All right. I'm going to thank for some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during the, I guess in my country at least, waning pandemic. I don't know about the rest of you guys. I think that we're going to start sharing all the vaccines that people are refusing to take here.
Some of that is starting to happen. Yep.
Yeah. So we want to thank Carl, Art, John, Niels, Albert, Jack, and Bertrand for their notes of gratitude.
We sure do. Carl, Art, John, Niels, Albert, Jack, and Bertrand, thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We sure do appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right, for AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.